Oh, hey there, Jennifer. Just in time. Okay, so we are live with another Tech Talk. And this time, Dr. Melanie Coyne is running the show, and our topic was, as listed on the newsletter, vicarious learning, which is, I think, still a big part of this, but I think also as you were kind of doing the research and preparation for this, it also kind of expanded a little bit in a pretty interesting way, I think. So,
yeah.
Take it away.
All right, cool, thanks. So I'm going to, yeah, I'm gonna go ahead and share my screen. Okay. All right. So, yeah, as Caleb said, this is really going to be a talk about some research-based recommendations for lecture videos. And let's see, we got to get this to flip. There we go. Okay. So the motivation behind this Tech Talk is that I had the wonderful opportunity to listen to some ASG students talking about their experiences with online classes. And one of the themes that kind of came out of it was many of them felt dissatisfied with the lecture videos. And so this list here is just some of the comments that came out of it. So students had mentioned they felt like the videos were too long. Some of them were saying, stop the pre-recorded long videos, it's too much. We want higher quality videos, maybe make them slower, more interactive. Some students mentioned that they felt like the live class session videos, the ones that were recorded in the classroom, were easier for them to engage with than the pre-recorded videos because they felt like maybe the pacing was better, and there were students in the classroom, so there was more interaction between the instructor and the students. And generally, they really were looking for more connection with their professors. And one student mentioned a positive experience was when a math teacher solved problems with students online. Mm-hmm. And so taking some of these comments, I just wanted to sort of address some of these with, as I mentioned, recommendations sort of from the literature, from research, how we can sort of address this in the lecture videos. So the goal of this is kind of looking through the lens of cognitive load, engagement, and active learning. And we just wanted to start a conversation about instructor-created lecture videos that includes evidence-based practices, but then also explores different ways to implement these ideas. So creative or interesting ideas, really just to open up a conversation. So first, I'm going to look at some of the ways we can address cognitive load in lecture videos. So cognitive load is just that learners have a limited amount of working memory capacity. And so in creating the lecture videos, we really don't want to overload that. We don't want to overload their working memory. So we want to try and manage that through our practices. And so one way to do that is through signaling. And so signaling just means highlighting essential material. So that when a student is watching a lecture video, they know where to look on the slide, right? They're not just looking at this very complicated slide. They direct their attention to what you're talking about. So ways of doing that would be showing keywords on the slide, showing changes in color or contrast, using arrows to point things out, or even numbering a sequence of events to help them follow along with the order. And so up on the slide here, I've got an example of, a simple PowerPoint slide. Perhaps somebody's teaching about the San Andreas Fault. And a common way that instructors show a certain type of fault motion is by showing the offset Wallace Creek along the San Andreas Fault. And if you're an instructor talking about this, it may be difficult for the student to look at that and really understand what are we talking about here with this offset. So just a simple way to signal that would be, in this case, just showing some lines, right? Pointing out exactly what it is you're talking about. Also, signaling is shown on here through the text on the slide, strike, slip, fault, right lateral offset, right? So just some simple ways.
So something that is kind of interesting to me about this, this reminds me of like when you're on YouTube and you're seeing like the list of videos trying to get your attention. A lot of them, I think, use this technique where, they'll have big bright red arrows pointing at a detail in the video of, you'll never guess what happened next, or this subtle detail. And like, I always just kind of thought of that as annoying clickbaity technique, but this is suggesting there's actually like cognitive science behind that of that kind of signaling increases engagement and attention effectively. So
Yeah.
that's interesting.
Yeah, it is. I think it makes a lot of sense. Yeah, you're really just trying to draw somebody's attention to the very specific thing that you're talking about or you want them to see. Another way to manage cognitive load is by segmenting. So breaking content into smaller pieces. And so here's an example again of a PowerPoint slide that just has a ton of information on it, right? It's always tempting to just like, you feel like you just want to show your students everything, right? And it's a lot for them to handle. So it's helpful to break it into smaller pieces. So in this case, this busy slide has been broken up into 2 slides with less content. Another type of segmenting would be the length of the videos by having shorter videos. That's also segmenting content. So just making it more digestible for students.
So would that be like having your own video about cupcakes, for example, and then your own video about cheese instead of even just like you could break it out topically like that?
Yeah, that's great. You could absolutely do that too. Instead of one big long video about cupcakes and cheese, you got your cupcakes video and your cheese video.
And like, that doesn't necessarily mean you have to throw out your old videos. Even it might just be a matter of taking a long lecture video and splitting it into segments, which is not difficult to do in like Panopto or something. It's pretty easy to do that.
Yeah.
That would be a simple way of implementing that.
That would be a good way to do it. I would say if you're going to do that, I would recommend framing each segment with context.
Sure.
So it feels like it's intentionally broken up. But yeah, absolutely. And then weeding is another recommendation for managing cognitive load. So this just means getting rid of material that does not support the instructional goal. So this could include things like extraneous content. So it could be like text, it could be, verbal content. It could also be getting rid of busy backgrounds or unnecessary animation. So I know it's tempting to sometimes want to draw somebody's attention by putting like animations and moving things, and sometimes that can overload students' working memory. So that's not always a good thing to do. Here's an example, again, going back to our Wallace Creek slide. So this would be an example of a PowerPoint slide. And in this case, I really wanted to put a really interesting background of metamorphic rock behind it, right? But that's not useful. That's not helping the student understand the content on the slide, right? So I'd want to weed out that background. A different kind of example of weeding is this image down here. Now this is a better example, right? So the one on top is like not a good example. This one,
example of poor weeding.
Poor weeding, right? This one is an example of probably useful weeding. So if you're teaching about electricity generation from an electric turbine, this example is weeding because what it's done is it's just pulled out the very specific elements that students need to look at to learn the content. So it's not actually showing a real picture of a real turbine that can overwhelm somebody who's new to this information, right? So really just showing the parts of the information that are necessary. Another example is teaching students about the function of the heart. So a really simple hand-drawn heart versus a really complex looking heart. I'm talking about the human heart. It's Valentine's Day, but I'm talking about the human heart. Complex image, right, of all the parts of the heart. Students aren't easily going to be able to, see the important elements of what you're trying to present.
Sure.
So that's a leading example. Another cognitive load example is modality. So in this case, presenting complementary auditory and visual information. So an example of that is when you're explaining something, you can illustrate what you're explaining or narrate an animation. Right, so you're taking advantage of both the visual channel and the auditory channel so that students have an easier time putting this content together, as opposed to having a picture and then a separate text or a picture with separate audio.
Melanie, I wonder, could modality also work to cross purposes if, for example, you have a slide on the screen that had one specific piece of content, and first you talk about what's on the slide, but then you keep talking and veering beyond what's on the slide. Would that be an example of your visual modality and your audio modality is now in conflict with each other? Or
Well, are you talking about what's on the slide or you're?
Yeah, well, yeah, so like your San Andreas fault one, let's say I had that slide up and I was talking about that, and then I go on to continue talking about a different fault line or some other concept, then I still haven't left
Oh,
that slide.
yeah, that's a good question. I would say in that case, yeah, probably, maybe that'd be a great opportunity to draw out the new thing you're talking about.
Sure,
right?
sure, sure.
Or have another image.
Okay,
Okay, so that was brief discussion of some of the ways to tackle cognitive load. So now we're gonna kind of switch and talk about some student engagement practices. So how can we work on lecture videos in a way that encourages students to actually view the lecture videos? What can we do to keep them engaged to watch the video? So the number one thing, based on what the literature is saying, is keeping videos short. So immediately by looking at a length of a video that's too long, students will be turned off. And so there's some research where they looked at 6.9 million video watching sessions.
Wow.
Right? That's a lot of data. And from that, they saw that an ideal length of a lecture video is 6 minutes or less, which sounds short, especially for those of us who are used to being in a classroom for 50 minutes, right? But that's what the data is showing. So 6 minutes or less. The median engagement time is about 100%, which means that on average, students watch about 100% of that video.
and in this research, they did this using like eye tracking software, right?
So
How do they?
I was thinking that was
Oh,
a different
oh,
study,
okay,
so thank you
okay.
for bringing it up. No, in this case, they looked at the data, but they were really careful to pull out data that either students like clicked on for less than 5 seconds and left, or that students they could tell when students walked away because they ran on past the time of the video. And so they curated this up pretty well, but
Gotcha.
yeah, there was another study that was eye tracking.
Okay,
And so videos that go about 9 to 12 minutes on the median engagement time is about 50% of that video. Right? And then once we get over 12 minutes, students watch about 20% of that video. So pretty interesting information on length there. So really 6 minutes, 6 to 10 minutes max is what we want to do for video length.
and I think this is super helpful because I feel like this question comes up a lot when we're working with instructors about video is, how long should it be? What's the right length? And here's good research-based evidence with a huge sample size that gives us some pretty definitive seeming answers to that question.
Yeah, absolutely. And also, as the length of the video gets longer, students seem to, their mind wanders, they lose focus. So even if they're watching the video, they're probably not as engaged anyway.
Sure.
Much like the glassy eye stare you might get in class.
Exactly, yeah.
Well, yeah, because when you're in a classroom and doing a lecture, I think that's also often best practice is if you just lecture for 40 minutes straight, you lose your students' attention, and you do have to take breaks, have some engagement, some questions or discussion or an activity or something before you move on to the rest of the lecture, because I imagine the numbers for an in-class lecture are probably pretty similar to these numbers here.
Yeah, I think they are.
Which actually brings me to Jennifer Barson say even TEDx talks are long, no
Yeah.
kidding. But that does bring up maybe a point if you have to potentially go over that 6 minutes, okay, oh gosh, it's all over. No, maybe there's an opportunity where instead you can put some sort of activity like a knowledge check or something.
Sure.
Yeah,
I don't know if that article specifically delved into that, but maybe that's kind of another best practice. We could, 6 minutes in, that's when you're going to want to hit them with some sort of engaging activity. Go to this assignment, right, or write in your notes, or
just a knowledge check in Panopto.
quick
Yeah.
quiz.
That's a good idea.
I
Just
love
an
that idea.
opportunity to keep them engaged, which I imagine, getting into 12 minutes, you're at 50% of that video is gone already, so.
Yeah, you've already
But-
lost half your audience by
Yeah.
the time you get up to 12 minutes. So you're right. If you're gonna have to go longer, it's a great idea to put some sort of knowledge check in around 6 minutes.
That's good.
That makes sense. Another way to keep students engaged is to target the video specifically to the audience of that class that it's for, right? So as opposed to having a video that feels really generic that's used for many classes over many years. And so the idea is to really situate the video in the course, meaning explaining to students how it's relevant to the course goals, explaining how the content in that video ties into what they've learned before that. And it can be done in the video or even just with text, a text introduction to the video, just to let students know that it's intentional and it's working towards meeting some very specific course learning goals.
Sure.
I wonder with this one as well, if you're trying to situate your video in your course, would like bringing current events that are happening, like that happened during the course, also be an opportunity to kind of like connect that to what's happening in that moment? So as a student, I read on the news and then I go to my geology class, like, oh my gosh, we're talking about the earthquake in Turkey.
Yeah.
And it becomes this opportunity to kind of add some, I guess, meaning behind the content that they might not already get. Is
And
that kind
I
of part of
think
the idea?
in a case like that, it wouldn't even necessarily mean you have to go and re-record your video on fault lines that you made a couple years ago. It might just mean include that context as a paragraph in front of. You probably know about this thing that happened in Turkey and Syria. Well, that was an earthquake caused by a fault line, and now here's a video that explains the mechanics behind that. And adding that kind of context would be a great way to, I think, do that target and situate it in current events.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, definitely add relevance there. Another tip is to use a conversational style. So this just means avoid formal language. You don't need to have technical jargon. Speak to the learners, speak with enthusiasm. So it's okay to say like, oh man, I'm going to show you something really cool now, or I'm really interested in normal faults, right? And let's talk about normal faults. And you kind of keep your pace moving. Students seem to lose attention when you're really slow, speaking too slow. And so here's just a quick example. So a formal language would be, so talking about how human lungs work. During exhaling, the diaphragm moves up, creating less room for the lungs. Air travels through the bronchial tubes and throat to the nose and mouth, where it leaves the body. Making it more conversational is really simple. It's just saying you. So during exhale, your diaphragm moves up, creating less room for your lungs, and so on. And that helps the student feel like you're speaking to them, like it's relevant to them and they're part of the conversation. And then show yourself on video. So students really want to know who their instructors are. And that helps them stay engaged in the video. So this example here is back to our favorite San Andreas fault slide again. And here's just a picture of me down in the bottom. And in that picture, I'm just kind of sitting in a basement office, and that's okay. Like, students don't need to see a perfect formal background. Like, be yourself, be in your natural space. Use natural gestures and facial expressions. Students, apparently, according to research, students have a preference for being able to have a nice view of their instructor in the middle of the camera, where they can see body language. So as instructors, we offload a lot of our cognitive processes into our body, into our hands and motions. And so that's important for students to be able to see, and that helps them to stay engaged and learn, right? We can learn geometries, we can learn, a lot of spatial knowledge from that.
Well, that also ties back to the enthusiasm part. If you speak with your hands and nobody can see your hands, then they're missing out on those cues that you're giving off about your own interest and enthusiasm for the topic.
Yeah.
So, yeah, that's good.
Yes.
That does remind me that I've got to share this as you're talking about that. And we had just talked about the anatomy thing, talking about you. I remember I had an instructor once in anatomy class, and every time they talked about certain things, they would like move that part of the body. And then when it came to the exam later on, it was a sea of undergrads all like doing the same thing. Like, oh, is this adduction or abduction? No, they did that. And then
Oh, sure.
everybody got to the same question at the same time. So you got an entire room
That's
of
great.
students doing the same thing.
That's great.
I see your point with like those
Yeah.
gesticulations.
And we got a couple of comments in the chat of people, Angela and Jennifer both say, I actually love the little mistakes that happen naturally. I don't edit out small mistakes anymore. Jennifer says, yeah, it appears more realistic. And I agree. And I think a lot of times when we overproduce this kind of content and it seems too edited and too slick, it kind of reduces that personality that is on display in the video. And they don't get as much of a sense of you as a person and as an instructor. Now it's just an overly produced actor in a video, and it's not the same.
Yeah.
So I think I agree with that.
Yeah, I think students appreciate that authenticity, as you guys have said before. Absolutely. And then just to bring in the active learning piece, right? We've talked about managing cognitive load, increasing engagement, and then also helping students to be active while they're viewing a video. So one way to do that is to ask questions and encourage note taking. So we can do embedded questions, right? Panopto allows for that, but we don't even have to do that. So just guiding questions before the video is a helpful way to get students to engage. And here's just a simple example. Again, this could be like part of a presentation about earthquakes, right? And so just simply, posing to the students in the lecture video, hey guys, take a minute, observe the pattern of the earthquakes here that you see. Pause your video, think about the pattern, jot down some notes. What are these patterns you're noticing? And then after you've done that, restart the video again, right? And that will help them to stay active. If you do embedded questions or more direct questions, that's a way for them to practice retrieving that information. It helps calibrate their sense of learning, right? To assess themselves with the content, and it can reduce mind wandering. All right, so just a quick summary of what we've gone through is to highlight essential material, break content into smaller parts, eliminate extraneous content, use complementary audio and visuals, keep video short, target your video to your audience, show yourself on video, and ask students questions. And so I see that we're running out of time, but then I wanted to kind of put it out there to you guys and to also show you an example of a really interesting way to take these ideas and to implement them in sort of a creative or a different way of teaching. I don't know, should we talk about the dialogue videos?
Yeah, I think we should. Yeah, let's do it.
All right.
That's what we advertise. So.
Yes, so we gotta get there. Okay. So dialogue videos, this is research that's done by Mickey Chi in her research lab, and I just think it's really interesting, and I love the way that this is creative, and I do think it's really engaging, and it does take into account all these things we've just talked about. So a dialogue video is a video that shows an instructor working one-on-one with a student. And so here's some photos. So in this example over on the left, letter A, this is a monologue video. So it's an instructor and she's working through a problem. And so this work has mainly been looked at in the context of STEM, so physics, physiology, chemistry. And so she's explaining a problem. That's the monologue video, right? That's more of our standard. The dialogue video is over here on the right side, letter B, and here's an instructor and a student. And now the student is actually the one working through the problem on the video, and the instructor is scaffolding him. So he's speaking out loud, working out that problem with the instructor's help. So why could something like this be useful? So the learner in that video can help break down the instructor's cognitive processes during the video. So an instructor as an expert often will approach a problem in a very different way from a novice student and doesn't always realize that the approach they're using is missing steps from the way a novice would need to hear something. So then that student in the video also then can explain difficult concepts in ways that are more accessible to students. So using more common language, perhaps metaphors, things that are easier for students to relate to who are watching the video. And then also, the student in the video provides a model for learning. So maybe showing the students who are watching the video how to ask questions, when to ask questions, what types of questions to ask. And then also these are useful because the students who are watching the video are seeing an example of scaffolding, right? They're watching that student get scaffolded, and scaffolding has been shown to be better for learning than just listening to an explanation. So it has all these really interesting benefits. As far as implementing this, it's an instructor would work through the problem or a question with a student. And then ideally, the students who are observing the video would be working on the same problem while viewing that video. Okay, so they're actively solving that problem with the student in the video. And then after that problem is solved, you'd want to ask perhaps a similar question or a transfer question to help students self-assess. Right? Do they understand that? Can they take that and apply it to the next thing? Maybe there's some logistical challenges to doing this, but if it was, and we're not saying you should go out and go do this for all your videos right now, right? It's just a sort of a fun idea to think about. And if somebody did want to try it, perhaps a peer tutor could be the student in the video, somebody maybe from a previous quarter of the class, perhaps an instructor from a different domain, a family member or an e-learning team member, right, depending upon the complexity of the content.
Mhm.
So this is when we were saying vicarious learning, this is an example of learning by watching others learn. It can be called vicarious learning. Or dialogue video. Tutor and 2T, yep, that's, yes, exactly.
It takes a lot of what the students were asking for in that ASG session you were in.
Yes,
As well as all those best practices and like melds them together in kind of a beautiful way. I mean, it's kind of like a little bit of a unicorn when I would say it comes to these practices.
Yeah.
Ticks a lot of boxes, it's really unique. I just thought that was such a great thing. You could bring that to kind of to the table and describe it for us.
yeah, I think it's very cool too. It's something I've been really interested in.
So I think if somebody is curious about this technique and wants to try it out, they should come and talk to us if they don't have. If they're not comfortable like grabbing a student out of the hallway and. Come here, let me teach you about geology or something. We would be happy to help with that and we can serve as the student or as the dialogue partner and something like that and help you try it out.
Yeah, absolutely.
No need to kidnap any students.
Yep, yep.
Not this week anyway.
Yeah, maybe for something else.
Sure. Okay, is there anything else we need to touch on before we run out of time?
Well, I blew through that pretty quick.
Yeah.
We got through it. I don't know. What do you guys think? Any other comments?
Maybe we throw it to the
Yeah.
folks in the room, see if anybody
Tried anything similar or? Yeah. One thing I will note is maybe if you can get me your list of references, I can include those in the YouTube video description and then
Yes,
turn those into clickable links and you can do the reading yourself.
yes.
Mm,
Yeah, good question, Jennifer. Yeah, you definitely have to get their permission to be able to show their video to another class, but within their own section. I don't know if you need to have them sign it, right? I think generally, as long as it's within their own class.
I think it would be a good idea just to, even if it's just like as an email in writing saying, hey, would you be willing to help me record this video so that I can share it with students in this class and also keep using it in the future? And I think as long as you just have that in an email chain, that's probably sufficient. Just make sure that the students are aware of what the video is being used for.
and yeah, you bring up a good point, Jennifer. If they are under 18, you might need like an actual model release form.
Yeah,
But I think Rick, sir, he's got all that stuff
yeah, if that's something.
at the ready.
Yeah, we can absolutely help you get those if it's necessary, but I do think if they're over 18, it does just a verbal consent, I think is sufficient. But I'm not a lawyer, so
Is that your catchphrase?
yeah,
My name's Caleb, I'm not
I'm
a
not a
lawyer.
lawyer. I have opinions,
To this
but
tech talk.
yep, exactly. But it's a good question, and that's something we could probably double check on just to make sure, but I don't think there's a problem as long as. It's some kind of record that they understand what it's for.
Yeah,
And that might be another reason to use one of your colleagues or one of us, and then you don't even need to worry about the student issue.
Yeah.
If you're worried about that. What were you gonna say?
it's lost, it's all gone.
Okay. Cool.
The last brain cell, it slammed into the other and they
System
exploded.
is such a struggle today.
Today's
Brain
been a
cells
struggle.
have been not functioning as well as they could be today.
Imploding left and right.
But
But you
it's
know
supposed
what?
to be-
Melanie,
Let's put
you
that
should
one
also-
great. Knocked it out of the
enjoyed
park.
this.
And yeah, I'm very curious to see if anybody watching wants to try something like this out. I'd love to see some examples from CCS.
Yeah, if somebody tries it, it'd be fun to hear about.
Especially if you want to use us as guinea pigs.
Absolutely. All right, well, I think that's about it for today. I'm gonna turn off the live stream on YouTube, so see you all next week. I forget what next week's topic is. I probably have it in here somewhere. Oh wait, no, stop.
You can do it.
I can do
It's
it.
on quiz statistics.
Yes, quiz statistics. Oh yeah, so that one's next time. You got that
That's
right?
right.
Me,
yeah.
And me,
Thank you.
I'll do it.
Yeah,
Cool, perfect. Next week, talking about quiz statistics to evaluate and improve your exams and exam questions. Yeah. See you then.
see you on the next
Bye,
one.
Jennifer.
Oh, Jennifer already left.